Jo Bailey, and welcome to my channel where I talk about all things brain. This video is part of my psychiatric profile playlist where I, as a forensic trained clinical psychologist, will be looking at some interesting people, criminals, politicians, and celebrities and trying to make sense of some of their crazy behaviours and crimes. This video today is part 3 of the series, 5 things that make no sense about the Chris Watts case. And today I'm talking about Nichol Kessinger and trying to make sense of some of her unusual comments and behaviours. Be sure to check out part 1 and part 2 of the series if you've not yet seen that. Or if you're unsure about the backstory to the case, I have a half-hour video that I made a few weeks ago, and that'll give you a good sense of the timeline and the overview of what happened. And I'll put a link to that here for you and in the description section below. But my guess is if you've clicked on this video, then you're probably already pretty familiar with the gruesome crime and the story, and you've come here to discover more about my opinion on the mistress in the story, Nichol Kessinger. Nichol is such an interesting character, and whilst I could probably spend the next 6 hours or more talking just about her, I want to get straight into this and be as concise as possible. Whilst there are many things we could be focusing on with Nichol, I simply can't fit them all into this video. So I'm going to answer 4 fundamental questions. They are: number 1, is Nichol lying? 2, was Nichol directly involved in the murders? 3, did she manipulate Chris in some way into killing his family? And 4, is she, or more accurately, was she at the time of the murders mentally unwell or mentally unstable? So Nichol, born in 1988 sometime, I think it's really hard to find her exact date of birth. She's now, 32 or 33, around that age. She studied, she became a geologist and was working at the Anadarko Petroleum Corporation when she met Chris, who was then an operator at the same company. Nichol gives a timeline of her encounter with Chris in her first police audio interview, and I'll link that interview below also. But I'm going to recap the main points that Nichol tells police in this interview. She met him May or June 2018, but not really spoke to him much at first. She noticed he never wore a wedding ring, which really is not that uncommon for people in those kind of jobs for safety reasons. She says it wasn't until the start of July or the end of June they first met outside of work, and Nichol says they just talked on that first encounter for a few hours. She says Chris, not long after, told her that he was married and had 2 kids, but he was in the process of a divorce. And Nichol says she never really knew about the 3rd baby, little Nico, that was on the way until she heard about it after the murders in the press. Nichol often says she can't remember the details when she's talking in the interview. She says it was so long ago, but mind you, the events she was trying to recall were within a 6 or 7 week period at most. She does admit that they had several discussions about Shanann, Chris's wife, and the children. She says that Chris was never hostile or aggressive towards her, and she absolutely saw no red flags to indicate that he could do something as violently as he inevitably did. She described Chris as a mild introvert, and she said that Chris could be himself around her and that he would talk about things that would excite him. I don't know what those things were, but she says he could just be himself. And the words Nichol used in that interview were chilled. She said that her and Chris never really had any arguments, he never lost his temper, and that they were both very open-minded about things. Again, I'm not sure what that means. She also says they have lots in common, including fitness, healthy lifestyles, cars, and Chris was willing to learn new stuff. But this brief and fast-paced love affair would soon be cut short when Chris Watts killed his family, his wife, his 2 daughters and his unborn child in the early hours of August the 13th, 2018. From the time he met Nichol, Chris seemed to change very rapidly during that 6 to 7 week period, becoming cold, distant, and unfamiliar and even scary to Shanann. And because of this overlap of meeting Nichol and Chris's change of behaviour, some people think Nichol had more to do with the murders than we perhaps know. Given that Chris pleaded guilty, allowing for a very swift conviction, trial and sentencing, and given Chris himself has said he would take some of the details of the case to his grave, some allege that Nichol got away with a bit more than we know. She got away without a thorough investigation, and some people wonder what might have happened had the police had looked further into the case, or had Chris had pleaded not guilty, in which case a trial and much more thorough investigation would have ensued. There are countless rumours, accusations, speculations and theories on the internet, and some pretty wild and wacky ideas being thrown around out there too. Many people have tried to find Nichol, including private detectives, and even Dr. Phil attempted to locate her for an interview, but she's gone. Simply seems to have vanished into thin air, but more about that later. So after the first police interview, mind you, Nichol presented herself to the Frederick Police Department to inform them of her relationship with Chris. So that's a key factor here too. But she was quick to go to the cops and tell them what she knew. But in the second police interview, which we will look at a little bit here, she seems to be much more apprehensive and defensive at times, and has admittedly deleted evidence in the way of text messages and Facebook posts and conversations to friends. And naturally, that kind of behaviour invoked some suspicion from the police. However, Nichol tells the officer she is super excited to help, and in the clip I'm about to show you, she's having trouble syncing her phones. She's trying to move information from one phone to another phone so she can surrender the first phone to the police to inspect. You will hear the officer ask Nichol if she has any objections to the police accessing all the content on her phone, the phone she's already attempted to delete data from. You'll hear her voice go up high in pitch and fluctuations in her tone, and she asks, "Why do you even need that?" Police explain why, and she's reminded of GPS location trackers within the phone. Anyway, listen out for some verbal cues from Nichol and watch her body language carefully here, because some have argued she's starting to freak out because she must have something to hide at this point. Take a look and then we'll come back and chat through it.
Sure, I get it. So he's going to come over and turn your Wi-Fi on and figure out how to move. He knows about this.
Do that. I give up.
Okay. So your phone this time, do you have any objections to us looking at everything in your phone?
Why do you even need that? I'm just curious. Like, why do you need everything as opposed to stuff?
Well, because it's easier to get it. And if we're looking at all the material, let's say I take everything off your phone, I can put a date in, like let's say August 10th through the 15th, because those are critical days. But other conversations between you and Chris, or other text messages between you and Chris from June or July, then it makes it harder for me to find all those. Do you understand what I mean? It's easier for them to just take everything. I don't know. Are they?
Yeah. I mean, except for when I first met him and it was his APC thing.
Okay.
I mean, you guys can have all that. I just was like, oh my God, I have so many texts on here between me and all my friends. I'm like, do they really want all this stuff?
Well, is there anything in those texts that you'd be concerned with?
Not really.
So, well, not really, or yes or no?
No, I mean, like, the other day, my dad and I just had to do some damage control because a lot of people were like, hey, please call me, I don't know what to say. And I just told them all, like, I didn't say anything. I pretty much just said, if mediators contact you, tell them no comment. I was like, please be nice to them. You do not need to talk to them. It was like, I'm safe, I'm not in trouble, I'm breaking laws. And it was just like, just send your love and support. And that was all I said to people.
So is there any text messages between you and friends that reference anything that would be concerning regarding this case?
No.
Like talking about Chris? I think you've told me that you've never even really talked with
my friends about him. No, and like my friend's dad died last night, like yesterday.
I'm not worried about that.
No, I know, but she started like, oh my God, she was really drunk last night. She started like freaking out. She's like, I don't know what's going on in your life. She's like, I don't know if it pertains to this case. And she like just sent me like a screenshot of a news article of that case. And she was just like, she's like,
what about conversations?
I didn't mention that it had anything to do with that. She's like, I don't know if that's what it is. he works at Anadarko. She's like, I really don't give a shit. She's like, I just really need you to be here with me and my dad and this and this and this. And she was just kind of upset because I had asked her to please say no comment to the media, and it happened to be like right when her dad died, and I think she was feeling a little like, yeah, but I mean, you guys can read this. There's nothing in there of me actually saying anything about it. I just told
What's your phone number on that phone?
720, it's the same phone number that's on this one, 656-9605. So no, I mean, you guys can, she starts.
Now, what you saw there was Nichol being unsure, worried, apprehensive about the police going through her phone and seeing everything. The officer asked her if there was anything that she was concerned about on the phone, and she says, not really. And the officer responds, not really? Or yes or no. Nichol engages in a bit of a discourse then, and she starts to talk about a friend, and you can see her trying to divert the conversation, but she eventually hands her phone willingly over to the police. Now, some have made a big deal over this, and to me it's rather trivial. I don't think her concern or her apprehension that we clearly see is anything more than what mine might be if someone was about to take my phone and go through every little detail in it, every text, every website, every Google search I've made. I know I don't have anything significant to hide, but that would be uncomfortable for me, and I'm not in the centre of a murder investigation. Any normal person is surely going to think, is there anything in my phone that might be misconstrued, might be taken out of context, misinterpreted, or even misused? Nichol's hesitancy in this moment actually makes sense to me. When Nichol was asked why she deleted text messages from Chris, she said it was because she was disgusted in him now, and she just wanted him gone and everything done with. And that seems plausible. It's not a sensible thing to do when you're about to be dragged into a murder investigation, but this girl certainly wasn't one to think things through. That's pretty clear. But was she hiding stuff? Well, we all know she outright lied to police a few times. For example, she told them she had not told anyone about her relationship with Chris, but then she mentions she was texting her girlfriend about him. She denied ever saying anything about not wanting children around, but we know she did in fact say that. She said they weren't intimate when they were. She said Chris was much more into her than she was into him. But a week before the murders, Nichol spent hours Googling for wedding dresses and searching on Google for how to marry your mistress. She told police that Chris was already losing it long before he met her. But then she said to a friend that Chris was just simply too good to be true. She said she didn't know that Shanann was pregnant until after the murders. And this one is almost impossible to believe, given all she had to do was look at Shanann's Facebook page. And who doesn't check out the Facebook page of the wife of the man you're sleeping with? That doesn't make sense. So that one's really hard for me to accept. Some of those lies may seem relatively trivial on their own. They may seem relatively innocuous. They certainly don't amount to the knowledge or involvement of a murder. But if someone is lying about lots of little things, it often means they're trying to hide something bigger. So I do believe Nichol was trying to hide stuff. But what was she hiding? Who was she protecting? And my answer to this is pretty simple. She was protecting herself, her own reputation, her credibility, hiding her shame and her embarrassment and stupidity and immaturity in all of this. I think specifically some of the things Nichol was hiding in not wanting to hand over her phone immediately was potentially some provocative text messages, sexually oriented content. And we now know she was indeed Googling some of these things. Now, I'm not going to say exactly what those searches were, but you can find out if you want to. Suffice to say, they were on the sexual side of things. So she probably felt really ashamed and embarrassed by some of these messages, especially given that they were communications that now we know were directed towards a murderer. So those things were most likely embarrassing, but not incriminating. So my conclusion here is that there's probably not a lot to read into her response there in not wanting to hand over her phone. I find her response in the next section, however, of this video much more revealing. Here the officer is inquiring whether or not she might have ever mentioned her dislike of children to Chris, and she repeats the words never, never when she's asked this a couple of times in another part of the interview. But she's quite adamant and defensive when asked at a later point. But I'm going to show you a part here where I find her response interesting, to say the least.
So let's just, while we're here, because we talked about this before, but we didn't talk about the specific context of what that message said regarding to children. So obviously in the situation that we're looking at now with the death of 2 children and all the other circumstantial stuff going around in the case, I just want to make sure there was no comments ever made by you regarding, children or dislike of children or love of children, either way. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I guess. Let me find it. I think this is where this starts.
Initially, you drew concern from me when you told me you deleted everything from Chris. I've already told you that. You understand why? There's no question as to why that might cause concern. So if there's anything else that ever comes up, I have it, and then we can just discuss it. Do you understand what I mean? All right.
It's right here. This is where it starts.
In this part of the video, Nichole's mannerisms, her behaviour, her expressions, and her voice all change. She is intentionally avoiding answering some of those questions related to her not wanting children. When the officer asks her, "Do you know what I mean?" she sort of goes, "I guess," like in this quiet tone. Her response is withdrawn, it's concealed, and it's rather different from that anxious, high-pitched, excitable voice that we heard only earlier. She continues to talk a lot about a friend who was concerned for her and some text messages that her and the friend sent back and forth to each other. But in doing this, Nichol is intentionally diverting the conversation away from the line of questioning and back to the friend. And I can actually sense a bit of frustration from the officer. I mean, this officer's fantastic and does his job exceptionally well, but I do see moments where he's a little bit frustrated with this and he intercepts and asks the questions more directly, the questions that Nichol is clearly trying to avoid. I see a real discomfort here, and possibly some of the deleted messages were going to be contrary to what she was telling the officer. Well, actually, we know that's true now because she did in fact tell her friend, the one in question in this video, that she didn't want a man with kids and she wanted these first with someone else. She even talks to the officer about this.
You're referencing that he has 2 kids and then you don't like that because you want to have that experience with somebody else? Is that what?
I just said I wasn't sure if he was the one that I wanted to be with because he had already done everything.
Okay.
I was like, it would be really nice to kind of have kids and have my own marriage and all of that stuff. That was never anything I conveyed to him.
So she was obviously avoiding here, but let's be fair, just because she wanted to have kids with someone for the first time, or just because she wasn't thrilled that Chris had already experienced all these firsts with Shanann, doesn't mean Nichol wanted them all dead. That's a massively long and simply erroneous bow to draw. So her admission here and her avoidant and diverting behaviour and discomfort makes sense to me. Having worked with many women in similar positions, I can assure you, often the mistress will present an ultimatum to the married man. It's her or it's me. And I do speculate that this is a very real possibility in what happened in this case. Nichol may have presented an ultimatum to Chris. It's Shanann or it's me. And this makes sense because this is what most people do in this situation. But it also makes sense because the fact was she was planning on committing to Chris. She was searching for rentals for Chris so he could move out. She was searching for wedding dresses. She was Googling about being with a married man. But we also know that Nichol at times was concerned whether Chris was actually going to leave Shanann. And we know from the police video that she told Chris to try and fix things with your wife before attempting to pursue me.
That was when I had said, hey, when you go to North Carolina, I really think you should try to fix things with your wife. And he kept asking, well, what about us? And I was trying to kind of take a step back and see if he would fix things before attempting to pursue things with me, because I wanted to know that if all of these things he's saying, like, yes, we're getting separated, and yes, you know, all of these things that he's saying are happening, I wanted to know that it was like, you were doing this, like you said you were, prior to me coming in your life, and it had nothing to do with me, you know. And so, for me, it was like, I really wanted them to fix it. I would have just, left the situation.
She wanted Shanann out of the picture, but does that mean she wanted her dead? I don't believe so. Now, one of the interesting texts that came from Chris to Nichol said, being in your life is something I crave. He also said, the first time we hung out at the park together, I knew I was addicted. Now, crave and addicted are interesting words for someone to use so early in a relationship. Admittedly, he was in that early passionate stage of a developing relationship where everything feels wonderful and new and exciting. But even so, knowing that Chris is a narcissistic sociopath, these words to me are particularly interesting. My best theory is that Chris was indeed obsessed with Nichol, and Nichol, obviously not knowing at the time that he was a sociopath, had mentioned, probably innocently and casually, that she regrets or that she was disappointed that he already had a family, that she would never get to experience those firsts with him. We know that she did in fact text that kind of sentiment to her friend, and that Chris had already been there and done that. So to think that she didn't also in some way communicate that to Chris just makes no sense to me. So what if Nichol did tell Chris that she was disappointed by this? The man who by his own admission was addicted to her and craving her. This could have been the turning point, the moment that Chris chose a pathway to murder. You see, narcissism and addiction both result in an individual risking everything to feed their craving, to feed their need, to feed their self. Narcissists and addicts will both lie, they'll steal, they'll manipulate, they'll do anything to get what they're desiring. And when someone is also a sociopath, they may even kill to fulfill their selfish desire or addiction. Now, before I directly answer those 4 questions I opened with, I want to quickly address some of the things I've seen posted on the internet and some things I've seen posted in the comment sections of my other videos that some people suggest point to Nichol's involvement in the murders. Number 1, she FaceTimed Chris, or Chris FaceTimed her the night of the murders, and he was sitting on the marital bed and she noticed that there were no sheets. Now, this is in fact true, and it was Nichol who brought this to the attention of the police because she thought it was odd that there were no sheets on the bed. Now, I'm not sure how people think this implicates Nichol, other than she was FaceTiming him the same night of the murders. But none of that discussion would prove to be meaningful or implicate her in any way. They chatted a lot that night, and Chris was so detached and unaffected by having just killed his wife and wrapping her in the sheet that all he saw in that moment was a chance, an opportunity for some uninterrupted FaceTime with his mistress, who he thought he would now be free to be with. So this one's on Chris, and I don't think we can use that to suggest Nichol knew of anything. Number 2 is that Nichol's Google searches later revealed that she was searching for terms like How long do phone companies keep text messages, and can cops trace text messages, etc.? Look, I think I explained this one already. She was embarrassed and she was ashamed and she wanted to be as uninvolved as she possibly could now, and trying to hide her spicy and inappropriate communication with Chris in the aftermath of what he did was a pretty stupid thing to do. But I don't think trying to hide it and Googling these terms equates with guilt or involvement in any way. Number 3, this one caught my eye. It was that Nichol allegedly Googled Chris Watts in September 2017, over a year before she even met him. But through my research, I've learned that the record supervisor of the Frederick Police Department had stated that this was simply a typo. Of course, all of Nichol's Google searches were later recorded, and you can see that this search, among many other searches about Chris Watts, occurred after the murders. Given that the 7 and the 8 are right next to each other on the keyboard and typos do happen, I think this explains, and the context of it explains what happened and doesn't implicate Nichol, and is simply a rumour that has spread on the internet. Number 4, one of those Google searches that Nichol apparently did subsequent to the murders was a Google search on Amber Frey. She was Googling Amber Frey's net worth, whether people hate Amber Frey, Amber Frey's book deal. Now, Amber Frey was a star witness in the highly publicised trial nearly 20 years ago that sent Scott Peterson to prison for killing his pregnant wife Lacey and their unborn son. Now, odd perhaps that she was Googling this, but it does make sense. I can say that these two women, Amber Frey and Nichol Kessinger, are very different. Most notably that Amber definitely did not know that Scott was married, and Nichol definitely did know that Chris was married with children. When we go through crazy and traumatic events, we as humans look for comfort in people who have experienced similar situations. It's a pretty common thing we do. It can be reassuring and comforting, as few others could really understand the magnitude of what we might be experiencing. Capitalizing on the situation might not have been the most appropriate thought, but it was just a thought. There have been no book deals. There's not even been any interviews with Nichol. And Nichol, from her first actions where she was trying to hide her involvement and protect her reputation, and what I've interpreted as shame and embarrassment and wanting a private life, seem to have continued because she is nowhere to be found now. She disappeared. Some are saying that she's in witness protection because she knew more than what we were told, and she cut some deal with the cops, and that's why they were able to move forward with such a quick trial and a conviction. And that's certainly a possibility, but to me, it's more likely, and in fact, I'm pretty confident that she just wanted to disappear, create a new name, and I believe there's evidence that she has changed her name legally, create a new identity for herself, pretend like none of this ever happened, which in my mind is probably a sensible thing to do. Number 5 was that Nichol's cell phone pinged in the Frederick area the morning of the murders. So some people are saying that she was there. She must have been involved. But apparently it was ruled out that she was at Chris Watts's residence and that she was in the area but was frequenting a local gym. This seems to be another thing that has gained momentum as a rumour on the internet, but I don't know for sure. I can only comment on what my research has shown, and the veracity of the information I'm privy to is relatively limited, but I don't think there's any evidence Nichol was at Chris's residence, or I'm sure the police would have investigated that further. Number 6 is one I've seen around, that Jamie Watts, who is Chris Watts's sister, was in rehab with Nichol prior to Nichol meeting Chris. Now, I can't find any reliable evidence of this at all, so I simply don't think it's true, and that this also is just another rumour. If you know more than I do, or if you have more than just a belief or a suspicion, you have some evidence or some reliable information that they were in rehab together, by all means send it to me. I would love to know more. But from what I can conclude, there isn't really any evidence for this. And even if perchance they were in rehab together, Nichol and Jamie, that doesn't mean they knew each other. That doesn't mean they even spoke. So I don't put much weight on this one either. Number 7, there's speculation that Nichol and Chris are still in contact, sending letters to each other. Now, this information largely came about from one of Chris's cellmates who was later released, and he told some outlets that Chris and Nichol were still in touch. Now, if that's true, the rumours of witness protection fall apart, which I don't believe is accurate anyway. But are we to trust the words of a convicted criminal? I probably wouldn't. There have been many women writing to Chris Watts in prison, and one of them is a clinical psychologist, of all people, by the name of Krista Richello. She ended up having a relationship with the cellmate of Chris Watts. Now, as a female clinical psychologist who's spent years working in the prison, it's women like that that bring our entire profession and female representation in that industry into disrepute. It's one thing to have a fascination with crime and criminals, as I do, but a very different thing to start up a relationship with a criminal. So would I trust her or the cellmate? Probably not. Chris, according to these unreliable informants, received letters from a female, and he believed that the letters contained secret information, a code of sorts that was really Nichol, privately revealing her identity in the confidentiality of this secret letter. I think we can move on from this one. I very much doubt Nichol would go to so much trouble to legally change her name, to be anonymous, and then only to reinvest in the drama of it all. Krista also believes that Watts is innocent, so let's really not give her any more time or attention. And number 8, the last one here before I answer those 4 opening questions, is the rumour that Chris, after killing his family, looked up the lyrics to a Metallica song called Battery, which has some spooky words in it really, including a line that says, "cannot kill the family." Now that bizarre little bit of information is actually true, and it was shared by police and is available alongside dozens of other disturbing details found amongst approximately 2,000 pages worth of documents detailing the case. However, I can't see how Nichol has anything to do with that. Chris was a Metallica fan. He'd been to concerts. He had pictures of Metallica on his phone. So that song had meaning to him. But as far as that implicating Nichol, I don't see the connection. Okay, so like I said, I could spend hours dissecting this one. But let's revisit those first 4 questions and let me answer those directly for you now. So question number 1, is Nichol lying? Yes, she lied about a lot of things. Number 2, was Nichol directly involved in the murders? There is no evidence I could find that suggests she was directly involved. The only thing I'm left unsure about is the theory about her being in witness protection, which could explain why she disappeared so abruptly, why Chris was convicted so quickly and avoided a trial. But my overall guess is no, that didn't happen. She's not in witness protection and she was not directly involved in the murders in any way. She's simply gone off the grid, started a new life somewhere else. So number 3, did Nichol manipulate Chris into killing his family? Well, I believe that she did, but I think it was unintentional. I also think this is the guilt, the embarrassment and the shame that she felt in the interviews, which appears as though she's hiding something. Once she realised what this man was capable of, she probably also realised the unintended role she played in it. She probably did put pressure on him to leave his wife, and the house hunting for him and the wedding dress searches and the comments about wishing he didn't already have a family, etc., played a role. She had the power in this relationship without even knowing it. He was addicted, obsessed, narcissistic and sociopathic. And I believe when Chris Watts left for that final week in North Carolina, Nichol probably gave him an ultimatum, and that ultimatum probably became deadly. Number 4, is Nichol, or more accurately, I should say, was Nichol at the time of the murders mentally unstable? And the answer is no. I see no signs of mental illness. What I do see is arrogance, immaturity. I see ego and I see pride. I see poor insight and very bad judgment. I also see some risk-taking behaviours and a woman without much responsibility and maturity. But I can't find any personality traits that would suggest she's narcissistic or borderline in her personality. And there's no psychosis and no delusions. She was dishonest, a bit self-centered, and she had this sexual energy. In spiritual terms, it's a Jezebel energy, which she probably used to allure and captivate Chris. But there's no psychopathology that I can observe. The way that she speaks, the way she slurs and sits and talks, her high-pitched tones, her deep voice, those fluctuations, and the words she uses. Side note, try counting all the likes that both her and Chris say. Like this, like that. You'll be counting for a long time. There's lots of them. And the reason I say that is because that's how teenagers talk. So there is this immaturity that we see between them both. Nichol's giggles, her body language, all of this speak to that immaturity, but not to her criminality. So no, there is no mental illness there. That's apparent to me. But my conclusion is that Nichol was not involved directly in the murders. And once again, the only person that I'm able to attribute any guilt to is Chris Watts himself. In video 4 of this series, I'm going to look at another element of this case that makes no sense, and that is Cindy Watts, Chris's mother. She's sure got a lot of people talking and speculating and accusing her of many things. And there's a lot to unpack there. So join me in that next video where I'll see if I can make any sense of Cindy's odd and overprotective and sometimes self-absorbed behaviour. I hope to see you there. Bye for now. If you found this video to be helpful, then please consider liking or subscribing to my channel. That allows me more opportunity to provide free content for you. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other and have a very happy and peace-filled day. Bye now.